She left Mafia boss after being insulted. Then he found the ultrasound photo hidden in her drawer. She did not cry when he said it. That was the part that stayed with her long after everything else. The dinner, the men at the table, the weight of the room, the wine she finished in one slow swallow. She did not cry. Her hands did not shake. Her face did not change. She simply sat there, in the emerald green dress she had bought with her own money, wearing her grandmother's earrings, and she listened to the man she had loved for 2 years reduce her to a word. A word he said quietly, the way powerful men say the things they mean most. Not loudly, not as a declaration, but as a casual aside, meant only for the ears nearest to him, which happened to be everyone at the table. Florist. He had said it like it was a punchline. And the men around him, men who wore their expensive suits and dangerous reputations like a second skin, had laughed. Nadia Cole did not. She had grown up in a narrow house on a narrow street in a town that didn't appear on any tourist map of England. Her mother, a woman named Gloria who had spent 30 years ironing other people's laundry, had taught Nadia 2 things before she taught her anything else. The first was that your hands were your future. The second was that no one got to make you feel small without your permission. Nadia had taken both lessons seriously. By the time she was 22, she had a small flower stall at the edge of the Saturday market. By 24, she had a shop. Not a big one, not a fancy one, a real one. Walls that smelled of greenery and damp soil, a back room full of wire and ribbon, and the particular silence that lived inside serious work. She could build a funeral arrangement that made strangers weep and not know why. She could look at a room and understand within 30 seconds exactly what it needed to feel alive. She had a gift, and she had fed it carefully, the way you feed something you intend to keep. She was 27 when she met Dominic Hale. She had been hired to do the floral arrangements for a charity dinner at a hotel in London, the kind of hotel where the carpets cost more than her shop's monthly rent, and the staff called you by name before you'd introduced yourself. She had arrived early, the way she always did, and she had worked through the afternoon setting up centerpieces, white roses, dark foliage, tall candles and mercury glass, while the event staff moved around her. Dominic arrived at 6, 2 hours before the dinner began. She noticed him because he did not move the way most men moved in those rooms. Most men in expensive suits walked like they were expecting applause. He walked like a man who had already received it so many times that it no longer interested him. He was in his early 40s, silver at the sides of his hair, a face that had been very handsome once and had settled, over time, into something better than handsome, certain, and a little closed, and completely controlled. He stood near the entrance for a moment, and looked at the room. Then he looked at her. Not the way men usually looked at her. He watched her work, her hands, specifically. The way she trimmed a stem at an angle without measuring, the way she placed each flower without hesitating. He came over after a few minutes and stood beside the table she was working at. "You do this by instinct," he said. It was not a question. "You do most things by instinct," she said, not looking up. "The rest is just practice that looks like instinct." He was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to call you," he said. She looked up then. He was looking at her steadily, without performance, without the usual machinery of flattery. Just a statement, clean and direct, from a man who said what he meant because he had never needed to dress it up. She gave him her number. She told herself it was because he'd asked nicely. The truth, which she admitted to herself later with the particular honesty that comes only at midnight, was that she had been a little undone by the watching, by the fact that he had watched her hands. That was her first mistake, though she would not call it a mistake for a long time. He called the next morning at 9. Not 8, not noon. 9, a time that said he had thought about it. They talked for 40 minutes about things that had nothing to do with either of their professional lives. He asked about her mother. He listened to the answer. He did not fill the silences, which was, she discovered, the rarest quality in a person, and the one she found most impossible to resist. They had dinner that Friday. Within a month, she knew what he was. Nadia was not a naive woman. She had grown up in a country where the names of certain men were said in a particular tone of voice. Not fearful exactly, but careful. Careful the way you are careful around something that can be useful or dangerous, depending on how close you stand. She knew the kind of organization Dominic moved inside of. She understood the weight of it. She stayed anyway. Because the man who called her at 9 in the morning and asked about her mother, that man felt true. And she had spent enough of her life making the practical choice that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to choose something for no reason, except that it was real. He was generous without being showy. He rented her a proper atelier on a good street in the city. Not as a gift, he was careful to say, but as an investment in something he believed would grow. He took her to dinners where no one ordered from the menu, and to weekends away where the sea was wrong and the sky was too wide, and she felt, for the first time in a long time, like a woman who had earned the right to take up space. She loved him, she thought, or something close enough to love, that the difference didn't matter yet. For 2 years, the difference did not matter. Then came the dinner. It was a working dinner. His associates, 4 of them, men she had met before and never trusted, though they were always polite to her face. The restaurant was private, upstairs, the windows overlooking the street below. She had worn the emerald dress. She had done her hair. She had arrived on Dominic's arm feeling, in a way that was unusual for her, and therefore precious, beautiful. She could not remember now exactly what had been said before his comment. She could remember only the structure of it, some conversation about backgrounds, about where people came from, about the difference between people who were built for certain rooms and people who had merely wandered in. And Dominic, without turning his head toward her, without pausing in the conversation, said something about her background, about her family's lack of standing, about her profession, about the modest origins she had not, in his implied opinion, sufficiently moved away from. Florist. That was the word, delivered as punctuation, a closing remark on a subject that did not require her response. The men laughed. She finished her wine. For the rest of the evening she was present, attentive, pleasant. She asked a question at the right moment. She smiled when smiling was called for. She was, by every visible measure, completely fine. She was not fine. She was doing the thing her mother had taught her, not the ironing, not the labor, but the other lesson, the one about permission, the one about what you allowed to land and what you let pass through you like air. She let the laughter pass through her like air. But what he had said, that she let land, deliberately, like a stone dropped into deep water. She needed to feel the weight of it. She needed to know it was real, and not something she had misread, or exaggerated, or invented from insecurity. She needed to feel the bottom. She felt it. On the drive home, he held her hand in the back of the car. She let him. He said she had been lovely tonight, and she said thank you, and her voice was even, and she meant neither the thanks nor the evenness. She waited until he was asleep. She lay in the dark and she thought about the shop she had built on her own. The stall before the shop. Her mother's hands, red and precise, moving over fabric that would never belong to them. The atelier on the good street that he called an investment. She thought about the 2 years she had given to this, and what she had believed she was building, and what she understood now she had actually been to him. She thought about the word florist said in that register. She made her decision by 3 in the morning. She did not tell him. She did not argue. She did not write a letter. She did not give him the satisfaction of her emotion in any visible form. She began, in the silence of the next few days, to prepare. The things she moved, the accounts she adjusted, the arrangements she quietly put in place, none of it was dramatic. It looked, from the outside, like nothing. That was the point. She had learned, from 2 years of watching how his world worked, that the most effective exits were the ones no one saw coming, because they had been made to look like stillness. She was very still. She was also already leaving. And tucked inside her, smaller than a secret and louder than anything she had ever known, was the thing she had not yet told anyone, the thing that changed the weight of every decision, the thing that made her hands careful in a new way, the way her mother's hands had been careful. 6 weeks. She was 6 weeks gone, and she was going to go further, and she was going to go alone. And she did not know yet, in those quiet days of preparation, that she was going to leave one thing behind, not by carelessness, not by accident, by instinct. The same instinct that told her where to place a flower without measuring. The same instinct that had, perhaps, known from the beginning how this story needed to be seeded, and where, and for whom. She was a woman who built things that lasted, even her exits. Nadia left on a Thursday. She had chosen Thursday the way she chose everything, with thought, without announcement. Dominic had meetings on Thursday mornings that ran past noon and spilled into lunch, and sometimes into the evening. He did not cancel them. He did not check his phone during them. Thursday was the one day of the week she could be certain she would not be interrupted in the middle of becoming someone else. She did not pack dramatically. There was no suitcase pulled from the top of a wardrobe, no armful of dresses swept off hangers. She had been moving things for 2 weeks. A blouse here, a book there, carried out in her work bag the way you carry out things you are simply taking for the day. By the time Thursday came, most of what mattered was already gone. What remained in the flat was everything she intended to leave behind. The emerald dress hung in the wardrobe, pressed and neat, exactly where it had always been. The weekend shoes she had never loved. 3 books she had already read. A candle. A spare set of keys on the kitchen counter, placed where he could not miss them. She cleaned out the drawers in the bedroom before she left. The third drawer was the important one. That was the one she had used for small things, private things, the kind of accumulation that happens when a person begins to inhabit a space. She cleaned it out to the lining. Almost. She left the photograph at the back, tucked beneath the contact paper lining the bottom of the drawer, lying flat against the wood, where it could only be found by someone who had reason to look. She told herself, standing there in the quiet flat with her bag on her shoulder and the keys already off her keyring, that she had simply missed it, that it was an oversight, the natural result of haste, of the particular blind spots that come with an emotional moment, even when you are trying very hard not to have one. She told herself that all the way to the station. She mostly believed it. The train to Birmingham took just under 2 hours. From Birmingham she had a connection. She had chosen the city not because she knew it well, but because she knew one person there. Her cousin, Claire, a practical woman who asked very few questions and had a spare room above a fish and chip shop on a street where nobody would think to look for anyone. Claire opened the door, looked at Nadia's face, and said nothing for a moment. Then she stood aside to let her in and put the kettle on, and did not ask a single question for 3 days. That was the best thing anyone had ever done for her. Nadia slept for almost 2 days straight. Not the sleep of grief, not the desperate unconsciousness of someone who can't face being awake. Just sleep. Long, flat, dreamless. The kind of sleep that happens when a body has been running on resolve for weeks and is finally allowed to stop. When she woke up properly on the 3rd morning, she sat at Claire's small kitchen table and ate toast, and looked out at the gray street, and understood, in the quiet way you understand things when there is no noise to cover them, that she was going to be all right. Not happy, not immediately. Not healed, not untouched, but all right. The kind of all right that her mother had been. Functional and honest, and built on something real. She spent the next week making phone calls. Suppliers she had worked with independently, outside of the atelier arrangement. A small business advisor she had seen twice in the previous year, quietly, not mentioning it at home. A letting agent in the city who had sent her a listing she had bookmarked and then closed without acting on, back when leaving, still felt like something she was only thinking about. She signed the lease on a small shop unit the following Thursday, exactly 1 week after she had left. She noticed the Thursday symmetry. She thought her mother would have liked it. The shop was nothing remarkable on the outside. A single front window, a door that stuck slightly in cold weather, walls that needed a coat of paint. The previous occupant had been a printing business, and the floors still smelled faintly of ink. She liked that. She liked the idea of a room that remembered what it had been used for. She painted the door herself. She chose a color she had always liked but never been able to use anywhere. A soft, particular green, the color of new stems in February. Not dramatic, just right. She set up her workbench in the back room. She ordered her first stock and received it on a Saturday morning, and stood alone in the back room opening boxes, and this was when she felt something that was not grief or relief or determination, but something warmer than all three, something that felt dangerously like joy. She built the business from the first week. She did not wait to feel ready. She did not wait for the sadness to finish. She worked around it, the way you work around a stone in the middle of a path, not removing it, just knowing where it is, stepping past it every morning. She was good at her work. She had always been good at her work. And the city, as cities sometimes do with people who are quietly serious about what they do, responded to her. Word moved in the way it does among women who plan weddings, and remember funerals, and know a florist worth recommending. By the 3rd month, she was turning down orders she couldn't fill. By the 5th month, she had hired a part-time assistant, a 19-year-old named Poppy who arrived each morning with coffee she hadn't been asked to bring, and who learned everything she was taught, and asked smart questions about the rest. Nadia did not tell Claire about the baby for 3 weeks. She did not tell anyone. She held the fact of it privately, close against her chest, the way you hold something fragile in a crowd. Not hidden, not secret, but protected. She had found out the week before the dinner. She had not told Dominic. She had gone to the appointment alone and come home and held the knowledge inside herself all through the drive to the restaurant and the meal, and the word said at the table, and the drive home, and the 3 in the morning decision, and all the quiet days of preparation afterward. She had carried it through her exit like a hand holding a candle in wind, carefully, with attention, making sure the flame didn't go out. She told Claire on a Tuesday evening over leftover soup. Just said it. Flat. Clear. Without performance. Claire put her spoon down. She looked at Nadia for a moment, with the particular expression of a woman assembling several pieces of information at once. Then she said, "Right. What do you need?" That was when Nadia cried. Not for Dominic. Not for the dinner or the word or the 2 years. She cried for the soup and the spoon being put down, and the simplicity of being asked what she needed by someone who meant it without qualification. She wiped her face after a few minutes and said, "I need to find a good GP." Claire had the number by the next morning. The pregnancy was uncomplicated in the physical sense. She was tired in the first months in a way that felt like her body was building something from the ground up, which it was, and she learned to work around it the same way she worked around the grief. Present, functional, slightly slower, careful not to knock over the things that mattered. She did not spend those months in anguish over Dominic. She was honest with herself about this. She had loved him, or something close to it, and the love had turned out to be built on a misunderstanding of what she was to him, and that was a painful thing to know. But it was also, in its way, useful. It was clarifying. It was the kind of wound that healed into scar tissue, which is stronger than the original. She thought about him sometimes, late at night when the shop was closed and Poppy had gone home, and she sat in the back room with her hands quiet in her lap. She thought about the good version of him, the man at 9 in the morning who listened. She wondered if that man had been real, or a performance she had simply wanted to believe. She never decided. She let the question sit without an answer, because some questions do not improve with forcing. The baby was born on a morning in February, a boy. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. He arrived in the world with every appearance of mild disapproval, as if the whole process had been more inconvenient than he had been led to expect. She called him Owen. She held him in the recovery room with the gray morning light coming through the window, and she looked at his face for a long time. He had her nose. He had her mother's particular set of the mouth, that faint, stubborn expression that Gloria Cole had worn all her life. And his eyes, when he finally opened them and squinted at the light with the vague suspicion of someone who has not yet committed to the situation, his eyes were still. She had seen that stillness before. She held him tighter, not from fear, from the understanding that some things do not end cleanly, that the people we carry in our lives leave marks that show up in other faces, and that this was not a problem to be solved but simply the truth of what had happened, lived with, like the stone in the path. She did not contact Dominic. She had his number still. She had not deleted it and had not added it to any list of blocked contacts because that would have felt like performing a closure she did not actually feel. The number simply existed in her phone, unused, a fact of her life the same way the scar on her left hand from a clipping accident at 23 was a fact. Present, not particularly interesting, just evidence of the life being lived. She did not contact him. She went home from the hospital with her son and her cousin, and a bag of things that included 2 sleep suits, a soft blanket, a card from Poppy with a drawing of a flower on it, and one item she had put in herself on the morning of Owen's birth, carried in the inside pocket of her bag, not for any particular reason she had articulated to herself. The photograph from the ultrasound, her copy, the one she had kept. She'd held it for a moment in the hospital room and then put it back in her bag and told herself she would deal with it later. Later came, as it always does. She put it in the kitchen drawer at Claire's house. The third drawer, the one for small private things. She put it beneath a tea towel at the back. She noticed, when she did it, that she had chosen the third drawer. She did not examine that too closely. She had a son to feed and a shop to open in the morning, and a mint green door that stuck in the rain and that she had been meaning to fix for 3 months and kept not fixing. Because some things you leave imperfect on purpose. Some things you leave open. There was a drawer in the bedroom of the flat in London that Dominic Hale had not opened since Nadia left. He was not a sentimental man. He had not been a sentimental boy. He had grown up in a world where sentiment was the thing other people used to leverage you, and he had understood this early enough to protect himself from it. He had pruned it out of his character the way you prune a plant, not with cruelty, but with intention, knowing that controlled growth produces something stronger than wild growth. He did not miss her the way he had expected to miss her. He had expected to feel something manageable, an absence, a gap, the mild dissatisfaction of a routine disrupted. He had told himself in the first days that this was precisely what he felt, and he had returned to his work and his schedules and the ordinary machinery of his professional life, and for a few days this was almost convincing. Then he came home to the flat on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after she had left, and stood in the kitchen for 4 minutes without moving, not thinking about anything in particular, just standing there in the quiet, and understood that the quiet was the problem. He had not known, until she was gone, how much of the silence in his life she had been filling, not with noise, with presence, the particular warmth of another person in a space, the second cup of tea, the fact of someone knowing where you were. He did not say any of this to anyone. He went back to his work. He kept the flat as it was for 6 weeks. He told his housekeeper, a woman named Florence who had worked for his family for over 2 decades and held opinions about most things, but expressed them only in tone, that there was no rush to clear out the remaining items. Florence did not comment. Florence rarely commented. On a Sunday in the 6th week, he told Florence to clear out what remained. He was in his study when she came to the door. He noticed the expression on her face before he noticed what she was carrying. Florence had an expression for most situations. There was her cleaning expression, her disapproval expression, her neutral professional expression that she wore during conversations she found beneath her. She had never in 22 years of working for him looked at him the way she was looking at him now. She crossed the room and placed a small square of paper on his desk. She left without a word. He looked at the thing on his desk. It was a photograph, the size of a postcard, printed in black and white, the image grainy in the particular way of medical imaging, the kind of deliberate clinical imprecision that is somehow more precise than anything else. There was a date stamp in the corner. There were measurements printed in small font along one edge, and in the middle of the gray, a shape. A small shape, curved like a question mark, impossibly detailed for something so small, impossibly present. He was a man who had made fast decisions in difficult rooms for 20 years. His ability to assess a situation and act on that assessment within seconds was not a skill he had developed. It was a thing he was. It was the reason he was what he was. He sat for a very long time and did not act. He did the mathematics. He counted back from the date stamp with the precise, automatic attention of a man who deals in numbers and timelines as a matter of survival. He arrived at a conclusion within 30 seconds. He sat with the conclusion for much longer than that. There were things he had not expected to feel in this moment. He had not expected the particular quality of the silence that came over him. Not the usual controlled quiet he wore like a second coat, but something different. Something that pressed down rather than holding still. He had not expected the physical sensation of it, the weight in his chest, the strange tightness in his hands. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He stood up and walked to the window and looked at the street below for several minutes. A woman was walking a dog. 2 men in work clothes were talking beside a van. An ordinary Sunday afternoon, in the middle of a city that had no idea what was happening in this room. He walked back to the desk. He looked at the photograph again. She had left it. He turned this fact over in his mind with the same careful attention he gave to information that arrived unexpectedly, that didn't fit the pattern he had anticipated, that suggested a different landscape than the one he'd been navigating. She had cleaned out that drawer. He knew she had. Florence had confirmed that everything else was gone. The drawer was empty except for this. She had cleaned the whole flat. She had left the keys. She had been precise about it, deliberate. This was not a woman who left things by mistake. She had left it there, for him to find. He did not know what to do with that. He had built his entire professional life on knowing what to do with things, knowing the next move, the correct response, the leverage point, the exit, the pressure to apply and the timing of it. He had never been a man who stood in a room not knowing his next move. He stood in the room and did not know his next move for a very long time. Then the other thing hit him. It arrived the way the important things usually arrive. Not announced, not dramatic, but simply present, when it hadn't been a moment before. It arrived with the particular nausea of recognizing yourself in a light you would not have chosen. The dinner. He had not thought about the dinner in the weeks since she'd left. He had thought about her leaving in terms of the fact of it, the logistics of it, the shape of the absence she'd created. He had not thought about what had come before. He thought about it now. He could hear himself, the tone of it, the easy dismissal, the word in that register. He could hear the laughter of the men around the table. He could see, with the clarity that comes too late, her face, composed, unchanged, finishing her wine with the slowness of a woman who had already made a decision she was not yet announcing. She had sat through the rest of that evening and said nothing. She had been pleasant. She had smiled at the right moments. She had let him hold her hand in the car. She had gone home and decided everything. And she had been carrying this evidence of a future that also involved him, through all of it, through the dinner and the car and the quiet days after, and the Thursday morning when she had walked out with her bag and left the keys on the counter. She had carried this, and not told him. He sat down. He was not a man given to guilt. Guilt, in his experience, was an emotion that existed primarily to make people feel that feeling it was equivalent to doing something about it. He had very little patience for guilt as performance. But what he felt now was not performed, and was not particularly comfortable, and was not, if he was honest, something he had a name for. It sat in the space where guilt might go and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like shame, and underneath both of those, beneath the clinical architecture of a man who processed everything through the mechanism of what comes next, was something quieter. Loss. Real loss. The kind that arrives after the thing is gone and the goneness has become permanent, and what you are losing is not the thing itself but the version of the future that included it. He found her in 3 days. Of course he did. He did not spend those 3 days being dramatic about it. He made inquiries through channels that were appropriate for making inquiries. He applied the same methodical attention he applied to all problems that required resolution. She was in Birmingham. He sat with this fact on Tuesday evening in his study, with the photograph on the desk in front of him and the gray London light coming through the window, and he made himself think clearly, which was, for the first time in his adult life, genuinely difficult. He had found her. The next question was what he intended to do about it. He could call. He had her number. She had not changed it, which he discovered through the simple act of attempting to reach her, which she did not answer, which told him she knew it was him, and had chosen not to pick up. He could call again. He could have someone deliver a message. He could arrive. He thought about the photograph. He thought about the dinner. He thought about the image of her standing in that hotel ballroom with her hands moving over the flowers without measuring. The speed of it, the certainty of it, the complete and quiet confidence of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. He had watched her hands and thought he understood what he was seeing. He understood now that he had understood nothing. She had not needed the atelier. She had not needed the dinners or the weekends or any of the space he had given her, because she would have built all of it anyway, and better, and entirely on her own. What she had needed from him was exactly what he had failed to provide. Not money, not access, not connection. Simply the ordinary recognition that she was a person of value. He had called her a florist at a dinner table. He had said it like a verdict. He picked up his phone on Wednesday morning and booked a train to Birmingham. He did not tell anyone where he was going. He did not bring anyone with him. He wore a coat and carried nothing, and sat in the train as it moved north through a gray and ordinary English morning, and felt, in the anonymous quiet of the carriage, something he had not felt since he was very young. The peculiar vulnerability of a man who is about to walk into a situation he cannot control. He found the shop without difficulty. A small unit on a side street, the kind of street you walk down without noticing unless you have a reason to be there. He stood outside for a moment. The door was green. A particular green, the color of something just beginning. It suited her in a way he could not have predicted and understood immediately. He pushed it open. The bell above the door rang once. She was behind the worktop at the back of the shop, her hands occupied, her head down over something she was building. A young woman with her hair in a knot was at the counter near the window. Both of them looked up. The young woman's expression shifted in the visible way of someone encountering a person who is, in some indefinable way, more than expected. Nadia's expression did not shift. This was the moment he understood, fully, with no remaining uncertainty, what he was dealing with. Because the look on her face was not surprise, and was not fear, and was not the anger he might have predicted, or the softness he might have hoped for. It was simply recognition. She had known he would come. She had known when she left the photograph, and she had built her shop and her green door, and her life in this city, and she had waited, not with longing, but with the patience of a woman who had a great deal to do in the meantime. She looked at him steadily across the shop. "You found the drawer," she said. Her voice was even. Her hands were still. There was something in her arms, he noticed, that was not there before. A carrier, worn across her chest, and inside it, folded into her the way very small things fold into the person carrying them. A child. He stood at the door of the shop. He had planned, on the train, what he was going to say. He had planned it with the same methodical attention he applied to everything. He had organized his points. He had anticipated her likely responses. He had prepared for several versions of this conversation. None of the versions he had prepared had included this moment, this specific quality of it. The green-painted walls, the smell of stems and soil, the child asleep against her chest, the look on her face. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He stood there. He said her name. Just that. Quietly, the way you say the name of something you have been looking for. She did not answer immediately. She set down the things she was working on, carefully, the way she always set things down, and looked at him across the shop. "Poppy," she said to the young woman at the counter, without taking her eyes from him. "Will you take your lunch now?" Poppy looked between them once, with the transparent curiosity of 19 years old, and then she gathered her things without a word, and went out through the green door, and the bell rang once, and they were alone. The shop was quiet. Outside on the street, ordinary city sounds. A car, voices, the distant clatter of a delivery somewhere. Inside, just the two of them and the child asleep in the carrier, and the particular silence of a conversation that has been a long time arriving. He crossed the shop. He stopped at the worktop, on the other side of it from her, and he looked at the child. The boy was sleeping with the absolute completeness of very young children, who sleep as if it is the most urgent thing in the world, fists loosely curled, face completely relaxed. He had Nadia's nose, her mother's set to the mouth, and something around the eyes, even closed, that Dominic recognized the way you recognize something from a long time ago. "Owen," she said, answering the question he had not asked. He looked at her. "How old?" he asked. 3 months, she said. He nodded. He did the arithmetic automatically, the way he always did, and it confirmed what the photograph had already told him, and he filed the confirmation without responding to it. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. It was not quite a question. It was the kind of statement that is honest about its own complexity, that knows it is asking for more than one answer. She looked at him for a moment. The steadiness of it was something he had forgotten, or not forgotten, but failed to hold on to properly. The particular quality of her attention when she was deciding how much honesty a moment could hold. "You know why," she said. He did. He stood with it. He did not deflect it or qualify it or manage it. "The dinner," he said. "Yes. I was wrong," he said. 2 words. He said them in a register she had not heard from him before. Not the considered, controlled delivery of a man deploying language as a tool, but something less polished, and therefore more true. Something that came from the floor of him, rather than the organized surface. She looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said. "You were." He waited. She did not follow it with anything else. That was the conversation. 2 words from him, and a single confirmation from her, and the weight of everything that did not need saying, filling the space between them with more pressure than any argument could have produced. He had walked into this shop prepared for several versions of her. He had prepared for anger, for pain, for coldness, for demands. He had even, in a version of himself he was not proud of, prepared for a version of her that had been diminished by the year of rebuilding, a version he could more easily manage. She was none of those things. She was exactly what she had always been, standing in the middle of a life she had built from nothing, with her son on her chest and her hands that had been working when he came in, her green door and her side street shop and her particular, infuriating, absolute completeness. He had nothing to offer her that she did not already have. He understood this standing at her worktop. It was not a comfortable understanding. "I want to be part of his life," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "That depends on you," she said. "Not on what you can arrange, on who you choose to be." He nodded. "I know," he said. "You've never had to choose it before," she said. It was not an accusation. It was an observation, delivered in the tone of someone giving an accurate weather report. "No," he agreed. Owen moved slightly in the carrier, a small adjusting motion, and Nadia's hand came up automatically, the gesture of someone who has been doing this for 3 months, who has learnt the rhythms of a person much smaller than herself, with the same instinct she brought to everything else. She did not look down at him. She looked at Dominic. "The shop closes at 5, she said. "If you want to come back at 5, you can meet him properly." He recognized what was being offered. Not forgiveness. That had been settled. 1 word, 1 confirmation. Closed. Not a reopening of what they had been. Something smaller and harder, and more real than either of those things. A door, cracked slightly. The width of a choice. His to make or not. "I'll be back at 5, he said. She nodded once, and picked up what she had been working on. He walked back through the shop to the green door, and pushed it open, and went out into the street. He stood on the pavement for a moment. A woman walked past with shopping bags. A pigeon landed on the ledge above the shop window, and sat there looking at nothing. The city went on around him, in its ordinary way, indifferent, as cities always are, to the specific gravity of individual moments. He put his hands in his coat pockets. He stood there for a moment longer, then he began to walk. Not with urgency, not with the direction of a man on his way to the next thing, just walking. Through the gray afternoon streets of an unfamiliar city, in the quiet between the conversation that had just happened and the one that was beginning. At 4:55, he came back. He stood outside the green door. He was on time. That was the choice, made in the simplest possible way, not with a speech or a gesture or a declaration, just showing up on time to a door that stuck slightly in the cold, in a city he had not known 3 days ago, to meet a person he had not yet earned the right to know. She opened the door before he could reach for the handle. She stepped back to let him in. Owen was awake now, held in her arms, studying the world with the specific and serious attention of a child who has recently discovered that the world contains things he has not yet categorized. He looked at Dominic. Dominic looked at him. There was a moment. Then Owen, with the calm authority of a 3-month-old who has decided a situation is acceptable, grabbed Dominic's finger. Dominic looked down at the hand holding his finger. He did not say anything. Neither did she. But she had stepped back to let him in, and he was standing in the warmth of her shop, and the green door was closed behind him, against the cold outside, and that was enough. That was, he understood, where things began. The months after that first visit settled into a shape that neither of them had planned, and neither of them discussed. Things between them simply became what they became, not through negotiation, not through declared terms, but through the slow accumulation of Thursdays. He came to Birmingham on Thursdays. Not every Thursday at first, then every one. He arrived on time, left when it was reasonable, did not presume beyond what had been offered, and did not attempt to convert access into ownership. This was harder for him than anything he had done in his professional life. He was a man accustomed to motion, to consequence, to rooms where his presence changed the temperature. He arrived in Nadia's shop and stood outside the ordinary rhythm of it, and watched her work and held his son, and was simply present, not directing, not managing, not applying the particular force of himself to the situation. It was the most disciplined thing he had ever done. Owen, for his part, had no reservations. Children that small do not carry the weight of context. He did not know who Dominic was in any sense beyond the specific, the person who arrived on Thursdays, who held him with surprising competence for a man who had clearly never held a baby before, who spoke to him in a low, even voice that Owen appeared to find convincingly authoritative. By the third month, Owen reached for him. Dominic was standing near the workbench at the back of the shop, while Nadia was at the counter with a customer. He had Owen propped against his arm, facing outward, the way he had learned Owen preferred, facing the world, always watching. Owen's hand came up and grabbed Dominic's thumb without particular ceremony, the way he grabbed things, with the cheerful confidence of a person who has not yet been told what he is not allowed to have. Dominic looked down at that hand for a long moment. He looked up and Nadia was watching from the counter, not with softness exactly, with the look of a woman who is observing a situation honestly and keeping her own counsel about what she thinks of it. She went back to her customer. He looked at Owen. He was not going to be the man he had been. This was not a decision he announced or documented or declared. It was not the kind of decision that benefits from declaration. It was the kind of decision that simply has to be lived, day by day, Thursday by Thursday, in the small, ordinary choices that add up to a character. He did not tell her this. He showed up. She watched. The change in Dominic Hale was not dramatic and was not instant, and was therefore more convincing than either of those things would have been. He did not arrive one Thursday with apologies and grand plans and the expensive performance of a reformed man. He arrived with consistency, with punctuality, with a respect for the shape of her life that expressed itself most clearly in what he did not attempt to alter. He did not suggest she move back to London. He did not offer to expand the shop with his money. He did not angle for a return to what they had been. He did not, in the way that powerful men often do when they want something back, make the person they want it from feel that the easiest solution is simply to give it. He held his son on Thursdays and drank coffee she did not offer to make specially, and said what he actually thought when she asked him something, and did not fill silences with performance. It was, he discovered, exhausting to be genuinely present. He had not known this. He had spent his life being the most controlled person in every room, and he had confused control with presence. They were not the same thing. Presence meant allowing a thing to matter to you in real time, without managing the mattering. Owen mattered to him in real time. Nadia, he discovered slowly, and without acting on the discovery, still mattered to him, in a way that had not changed. But he held that knowledge, the way she had held the photograph, carefully, privately, not as a plan, but as a fact of himself that he had not yet decided what to do with. She, for her part, had been watching. Nadia had grown up watching her mother. She had learned from Gloria Cole that you could tell a great deal more about a person from what they did without an audience than from what they did when they knew they were being observed. She had watched Dominic for months, not hoping for anything specific, not measuring him against a standard she had secretly decided in advance. Just watching, with the honest attention she brought to everything, letting what she saw mean what it meant. What she saw was a man learning, not performing learning, not executing a strategy of apparent improvement in order to get something he wanted, actually learning, the way it looks when it is real, which is to say uncertain, and slow, and occasionally wrong, and always continuing. She watched him figure out how to sit on the floor with Owen, who at 6 months had developed strong opinions about not being held when he preferred to be on the floor, and strong opinions about being held when he preferred not to be on the floor, and communicated all opinions at volume. She watched him work out, over several Thursdays, how to read which Owen was currently operating. She watched him get it wrong and adjust without drama. She watched him figure out that Owen liked to be talked to in complete sentences and treated with the mild seriousness usually reserved for adults. And she watched Dominic do this naturally, without irony, as if it had simply occurred to him that this was the correct way to treat a person, regardless of size. She watched all of this, and she said very little. In the 8th month, he arrived on Thursday and found her in the back room with her head on her arms on the worktop, and Poppy at the counter, covering the shop, and Owen, asleep in the pram in the corner. She had been crying, or had been close to it. Her face, when she lifted it, had the particular tightness of someone managing the edge of something. He set down his coat. He put the kettle on. He said nothing. She watched him make tea. "Gloria's not well," she said. He nodded. Her mother. He had heard enough about Gloria Cole over 2 years to know who she was, and he understood, without needing it explained, what not well meant in the specific weight she gave the words. He put a cup in front of her. He sat down across the worktop. "Tell me about her," he said. So she did. She talked about Gloria for the better part of an hour, not about the illness, but about her mother, about the dry cleaning shop and the red hands, and the care with which she had pressed other people's expensive things, about the 2 lessons she had taught Nadia before she taught her anything else. She talked about Gloria in the way you talk about someone you love and are afraid of losing, the stories coming faster than the feelings too large to approach directly. He listened. He did not fill the silences. He did not manage them. He sat in them with her the way someone sits with another person in a difficult moment, not fixing it, not redirecting it, just being there in it. When she finished, she looked at him across the worktop. Something shifted between them in that moment. Not a declaration, not a decision, just the natural settlement of 2 people who have been orbiting the same truth for a long time, finally letting it take its correct shape. She looked at him for a moment and then said, "You're different." He considered this. "I'm trying to be," he said. "I know," she said. "That's what I mean." He nodded. He looked at his cup. "I know that's not enough on its own," he said. "What I'm trying to be now doesn't undo what I was." She was quiet. "No," she said. "It doesn't. But it's what I have to offer," he said. "That and showing up." She looked at him for a long moment with the honest attention she gave to everything, to flowers, to arrangements, to the problem of a room that needed to feel alive. "It's not nothing," she said. Those 3 words were the most she gave him. They were also, he understood, more than he had earned until recently, and more than he had been certain she would ever offer again. He did not try to expand them into something they were not. He accepted them for what they were, a small opening, true, carefully measured, freely given. He came back the following Thursday, and the Thursday after that. He was, always, on time. Nadia's shop grew. By the time Owen was a year old, she had taken on the unit next door and broken through the wall, and the mint green door now opened into a double space that smelled twice as much of stems and soil and the particular productive quiet of serious work. She had 2 assistants now. She turned away more orders than she filled, and was selective in the way that only the genuinely good can afford to be. She had fixed the door. The one that stuck in the rain, she had a carpenter in one morning, and it was done in an hour, and the door opened smoothly now, and she had stood looking at it after the carpenter left and felt nothing but a mild satisfaction at a practical problem resolved. Some things you leave open because they are not ready to be closed. When they are ready, you close them. She visited Gloria on weekends when Owen was with Dominic, an arrangement they had arrived at without formality, the way most of their arrangements arrived. Through the natural logic of what was needed, Gloria was slower now, quieter, more present in the particular way of people who have stopped rushing. She sat with Nadia in the front room of the narrow house in the narrow street, and drank tea and looked at photographs of Owen and said, reliably, each visit, that he had the look of a boy who knew what he was about. Nadia agreed that he probably did. On one of these weekend visits, Gloria asked about Dominic. Not pointedly, not with the loaded register of a mother angling for information. She asked the way she asked most things. Directly, without decoration, as a person who had spent her life being practical and had no patience for indirect routes to information. "Is he good to Owen?" she asked. "Yes," Nadia said. "Is he learning to be good to you?" Gloria asked. Nadia was quiet for a moment. "He's trying," she said. Gloria made a small sound. The sound of a woman who had been watching people try to be better for 67 years and had developed precise calibration for the difference between trying as performance and trying as genuine effort. "That's the best version of them, usually," Gloria said. "The ones who actually try." Nadia looked at her mother. "Did you know that?" she asked. Before I was old enough to figure it out myself." Gloria smiled. "I knew it," she said. "I just couldn't think of a way to tell you that didn't sound like settling." "It isn't settling, is it?" Nadia said. "No," Gloria said. "It's choosing. There's a difference." Nadia took her mother's hand. Red and careful, still. A little slower now. But recognizably the hands that had pressed other people's expensive things for 30 years and had never, not once, stopped being useful. Owen was brought by Dominic to meet Gloria the following month. He sat on the carpet in the front room and regarded Gloria with the calm, comprehensive attention he brought to all new things, and Gloria looked back at him with the same quality of attention, and after a moment she laughed. A sudden, unguarded laugh, the laugh of a woman recognizing something unexpected. "He looks exactly like you at that age," she said to Nadia, "except the eyes." "I know," Nadia said. Dominic was standing near the door. He had not been sure he would be included. He had stood on the pavement outside while Nadia went in first, and had waited, and then the door had opened, and Nadia had looked at him, and stepped back to let him in. The same gesture as the shop, the same quality to it. A door, held open, an invitation that was also a choice. His to accept in the spirit it was offered, which was not as a return to what was, but as the beginning of something that had not yet been named, and did not need to be. He came in. He said good afternoon to Gloria, and shook her hand, and sat where he was told to sit, and answered the questions Gloria asked him directly and honestly, and did not attempt to manage the impression he was making. Gloria watched him the way Nadia watched things. When he and Owen had gone, Owen carried out under Dominic's arm in the horizontal position Owen had recently decided was his preferred mode of transport. Gloria sat with her tea and was quiet for a moment. "He's ashamed," she said. "Yes," Nadia said. "Good," Gloria said. It was not forgiveness. It was not endorsement. It was the simple, practical assessment of a woman who had spent a lifetime distinguishing between the people who were capable of seeing themselves clearly and the people who were not, because this distinction mattered more than most of the things people talked about mattering. The years after that settled in the way years do when the crisis has passed and what is left is the ordinary. Not ordinary as a disappointment, but ordinary as the thing that is actually valuable, the texture of a life being lived without emergency. Owen grew. He walked at 11 months, and the following week attempted stairs, with predictable and immediately interrupted results. He talked early. In the fashion of a person who had opinions he had been waiting for the verbal capacity to express. He was funny in the way that children are funny when they are being entirely serious. He was stubborn in exactly the way his mother was stubborn, and still in exactly the way his father was still, and these qualities combined in him in a way that suggested a person who would know what he wanted, and wait patiently and absolutely for the precise conditions under which he intended to get it. Nadia watched him become himself. Dominic watched him become himself. They watched this, mostly, together, on Thursdays and on alternate weekends and on the particular ordinary occasions, Christmas morning, Owen's second birthday, a Tuesday in spring when the shop had a good day and she called him because she wanted to tell someone who would understand what a good day meant. That Tuesday she called him because she wanted to tell someone who would understand. She noticed that she had done this. She filed the noticing without examining it too closely, the way you file a thing that is not ready to be decided yet. But she did not pretend she had not noticed. Some drawers, she understood. You leave things in until the right person finds them, and sometimes that person finds them and comes to your green door and learns to show up on time, and you watch them learn, and you decide, slowly, in the same way you decide everything, with instinct and honesty, and your hands already moving before your mind has caught up, that what is in the drawer is not a wound but a seed, and you decide to let it grow. She reached across the counter on a Thursday afternoon in the 2nd October and picked up her pen and was already back to work before he could say anything. He didn't say anything. He put Owen down on the rug in the corner with the wooden block set Owen treated as both toy and architectural project, and he got the other chair from near the window, and he sat in the back room in the warm smell of the shop and the quiet of a weekday afternoon, and was simply there, simply present. It was, she thought, without looking up from what she was working on, enough. It was, in fact, more than enough. It was everything that mattered, arranged the way she arranged everything, not by accident, not by luck, not by the intervention of anyone more powerful than herself, by her own careful hands, by instinct, by the knowledge, which she had carried through all of it, that she had always been building something worth more than what she had left behind. She had just needed the space to finish it. The mint green door was closed against the October cold. She had fixed it herself.